My stepdaughter died 4 weeks ago and I caught my husband and his ex-wife in our bed. 4 weeks ago, my stepdaughter Becca died. It happened so suddenly, in a car accident with her friend and the friend's parents. She was just 14 years old. We were really close. Becca called me Mom, even though I wasn't her real mom. She was like my own daughter. Losing Becca felt like a punch to the gut. It was the worst pain I had ever felt. My husband, Derek, and his ex-wife, Sam, were struggling too. It's hard to imagine how tough it was for them, losing a daughter and being there for her mother. Sam, who had no family other than Derek and me, was having a lot of trouble coping. She was so sad and overwhelmed that she needed someone to be there for her, to make sure she was okay. So, we invited her to stay with us. It made sense. She was heartbroken, just like the rest of us. We wanted to make sure she was okay and had a place to stay. It felt like the right thing to do, and Sam seemed to appreciate it. It was sad to watch her just staying in Becca's room, missing her daughter so much. It's hard to imagine how she felt. I always made sure to tell her there was no rush to go back home. We wanted to make sure she had all the time she needed to grieve and that I was there for her if she needed anything. I told her I was always there to talk or just be with her if she needed someone to be around. The house was quiet with her here. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock and the occasional whimper from Sam. She barely spoke, hardly even left Becca's room, spending her days and nights asleep, I imagined, replaying all the happy moments they'd shared. Today I needed to go out for a few hours to run some errands. I asked Sam if she wanted to come along to get out of the house. She usually didn't, but sometimes she'd get bored of staying inside. I thought it might help, but she politely declined, saying she wanted to stay at home and sleep. I understand completely. Before I left, I made sure Derek knew where I was going and when I would be back, which was around 2 hours. He works from home and I asked him to check on Sam every now and then, maybe try and get her to eat something, because even grieving needs food. After going to the post office, I realized I forgot my library book. It was due today and I'd already gotten a notice, so I quickly went back home to grab it. I wasn't looking forward to going back into the house, knowing Sam was still there, but I needed the book, so I was quickly back in the driveway. As I walked through the door, I heard a low, groaning sound coming from the bedroom. The room I shared with Derek. My heart dropped to my stomach and felt like it was going to fall out of my chest. In that second, I knew exactly what was happening. I couldn't breathe. The pain was immense, 1,000 paper cuts at once, each one sharp and excruciating. I felt sick to my stomach. All the years of love, trust, and friendship were suddenly gone, replaced with a sickening hollowness. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, frozen, unable to move. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was whimper, a tiny sound that echoed the emptiness I felt. My thoughts swirled in a chaotic dance. I wanted to run, but where could I go? My best friend, my confidant, was gone. My life had been shattered. Finally, I took a shaky breath. I had to do something. My feet, as if guided by some invisible force, began to move toward the bedroom. I slowly walked down the hallway and reached the bedroom door. I hesitated, the pain twisting my gut like a knife, but I knew I had to find out if what I thought was happening was actually true. As I reached for the doorknob, I could hear a whisper. My name, soft and whispered like a secret. The words caught in my throat, sending another wave of pain crashing over me. I finally mustered the courage to open the door. My eyes, blinded by tears and pain, landed on the two figures tangled on the bed. My body froze, my world shrunk to this single image, the room spinning as my legs buckled. Derek and Sam were entangled, both of them stripped naked. Their skin was flushed, their faces buried in each other. Their bodies, intertwined, were proof of their betrayal. The room smelled of shame and deceit. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Their movements, their intertwined limbs, whispered a truth I didn't want to acknowledge. I needed to believe that it was a mistake. They were hurting, maybe they needed comfort, but even as my mind struggled to rationalize, my heart knew better. This wasn't about comfort, it was about betrayal. The room felt cold, even though the heat radiating off Derek and Sam's bodies was intense. I felt like a ghost, invisible and unwanted, lost in my own life. I felt as if a piece of my heart was ripped out of my chest. I had been stabbed in the back by the people I loved the most. For a moment, I considered just leaving. I could run, escape from the truth and the pain, but a primal force, an instinctual urge, drew me to confront them. My voice cracked as I forced myself to speak. What is going on? I said, each word like a sharp nail scraping across a chalkboard. Derek scrambled back, pulling the sheet up to cover his nakedness, but Sam remained still, a confused expression on her face. She looked like a startled deer, her eyes wide with shock. Derek tried to speak, his voice choked with emotion, but the only words that came out were a string of apologies. "I'm so sorry," he repeated, his face filled with regret, or perhaps it was just guilt. Sam sat up, tears streaming down her face. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. The only sounds were the heavy breaths she was taking, a sound that seemed to be fueled by fear and panic. As if sensing her need for words, I turned to her. "You're hurting," I said softly, but my voice betrayed me. It came out filled with hurt and anger. "I thought we were friends." "I'm so sorry," Sam finally whispered. "I don't know what came over me. We were just talking about Becca, sharing memories, and then I just kissed him. And everything just went downhill from there. We just needed each other. I couldn't be alone." I watched them, tears streaming down my face. My hands trembled as I gripped my library book, the paper feeling coarse under my fingers, as if my body had become an alien object. I felt numb, frozen, the world around me fading away. "No, Sam, it wasn't about needing each other. You betrayed me, both of you. You betrayed everything we had built together." Derek, desperate for me to understand, spoke up. "It's not what you think. We were just grieving, hurting, and then we just..." He couldn't finish the sentence. The words died in his throat. I couldn't stand to hear them. My mind replayed the events, searching for something to make sense of this. I had believed they had grieved together because they both cared for Becca. I thought that they understood what we were all going through, that they were supportive of each other. I thought they were my friends. But the evidence before me spoke a different truth. They were grieving in the most insidious and hurtful way possible, by finding solace in each other. Their pleas for understanding fell on deaf ears. I couldn't forgive them. I couldn't even look at them. I turned and ran out of the room. My legs carried me blindly through the house. I needed fresh air. My chest was tight with a mix of anger, betrayal, and despair. I stumbled through the back door into the cool night air, feeling as though my body had been replaced by something brittle, something fragile, on the verge of shattering. I stumbled onto the deck and collapsed into a chair. The air felt cold and heavy, the weight of it pressing down on me. The sky was a sea of dark, foreboding gray. A storm was brewing, and I felt like I was right in the middle of it. My heart felt like it was being ripped apart. How could they do this to me? I loved them both. I believed in them, and they had just shattered my world, their words of grief and comfort twisting like snakes around me. I wanted to scream at them, to demand explanations, but the only sound I made was a choked sob. The wind howled around me. The trees outside swayed back and forth as if trying to comfort me. But no comfort could come from this pain. My thoughts, like a whirlwind, twisted and turned. What would I do? How could I possibly live with the knowledge of this betrayal? I had no answers. This was a grief that went beyond the death of my stepdaughter. It was a new kind of pain, a deeper, more profound hurt. The rain began to fall. I watched as the drops began to splash down on the wooden deck, creating a rhythmic tapping sound. I thought of Becca, how she would be upset, how she wouldn't understand why Derek and Sam did this. She was such a sweet and kind person. I wish she was still here. I wish we could all be together again. The pain was unbearable. I sat on the deck, feeling the coldness of the wet wood beneath me. The rain beat down on me, a steady drum against my skin. It was as though the storm itself was a reflection of the turmoil inside me. Hours passed. I watched the rain fall, listening to the symphony of sounds that it made as it drummed against the leaves, the windows, the rooftop. The world around me felt distant, shrouded in a veil of gray. The night felt long and heavy. My thoughts were a constant, painful loop, a recurring nightmare of the betrayal, a painful reminder of what I had lost. I closed my eyes, but images of them, their faces distorted by the pain, kept flashing in front of my eyes. I could smell their perfume, the scent of their intertwined bodies. I heard the echoes of their whispers, the sound of their laughter as they lay in bed together. I tried to erase them, to block out the memories, but the images lingered. I thought I needed them, but now I knew that I didn't need anyone who could do this to me. As the first rays of dawn peeked through the clouds, the rain stopped. The world seemed to sigh with relief as the sun slowly began to paint the sky with the colors of a new day. As the light flooded my backyard, it also flooded my soul. I had the choice to stay in this darkness, to be swallowed by it. Or I could choose to let the light in. I could choose to move on, to find my way back to my life. My world felt small now, almost impossibly fragile. I was afraid to make the wrong choices, afraid of making a decision that would hurt me even more. My pain felt heavier, it had transformed from a wound into a deep, gaping hole. But I was tired of grieving and being betrayed. I needed to figure out how to mend the pieces, to find a way to put the broken shards of my life back together. I had been through a lot, losing my stepdaughter, facing this betrayal. I had reached my limit. My life had changed, forever. The thought of talking to a lawyer was frightening, but I was done with living in a state of perpetual fear. The thought of seeing Derek's face, trying to explain, to say he was sorry, made me sick to my stomach. But I knew I had to face him. I had to face them both, for my own sake. The next day, Derek came to see me. He was wearing the same suit he'd worn to Becca's funeral. It still had a tear on the lapel, from when I had to hug him tightly during the service. Now, it felt like a symbol of the pain we were both going through. He had a look of despair in his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I know I don't have a right to be here. But I had to tell you." "Tell me what?" I said, my voice flat. He tried to explain himself. He told me that he'd been feeling so lost, so stressed about Becca. He talked about the grief and how he hadn't known how to process it all. He said he had started drinking more, and then, when I left, he'd felt so lonely. But that's just not an excuse for betraying someone you're supposed to love, someone you're supposed to care for. He could have asked me for help. He could have reached out to someone, anyone, other than his ex-wife. He told me that Sam came over, that she said she knew how he felt and offered to be there for him. He said she said he was allowed to grieve, and that she was there for him. I knew that wasn't true. I knew that she was probably hurting, too, that she missed Becca just as much as he did, but she was also someone who had walked away from him before. He didn't deserve her, or her sympathy. I was just as upset about the betrayal as he was, but he'd made the choices. He had chosen her over me. It took a long time, but eventually I said to Derek, "Derek, I can't be with someone who does this to me. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't grief. It was a conscious choice, and you made that choice. You didn't need comfort, you wanted an excuse." I started talking about lawyers, about ending our marriage. Derek didn't argue. He just said he understood, that he wouldn't fight me. He wanted me to be happy, but the tears streaming down his face showed me that he really hadn't understood anything at all. Sam tried to call a few times, wanting to explain, but I wouldn't answer her calls. I was too hurt, too heartbroken, to even think straight. All I wanted to do was to curl up in my bedroom, surround myself with Becca's old toys and stuffed animals, and try to hold back the endless tears. I spent my days trying to navigate a world that seemed to be spinning without me. My life had suddenly turned into a series of phone calls, meetings with lawyers, and arguments with Derek over who was keeping what from the house. Each moment felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying to keep the fragile pieces of my life from falling apart. It was a painful reminder of the life we had built together, and how quickly it could all disappear. One evening, while digging through Becca's closet, looking for a box to pack away her old clothes, I found her diary. I'd known she kept one. It felt a little weird, at first, but it wasn't out of the ordinary for a 14-year-old to keep her thoughts and secrets to herself. I held the diary in my hands, its leather cover smooth and soft. There was a small keyhole at the top and I knew it had a lock, but there was no key. I felt conflicted. I knew this was Becca's diary, but at the same time, it felt like an invitation. I wanted to learn more about Becca, to understand what she was thinking, to feel close to her again. I looked around for a tool, a penknife or something else that could be used to break the lock. I'm not sure why I felt I had to break the lock. It was Becca's diary, it was up to her to share, but something inside me was calling for this piece of Becca. I sat down with the diary and found a paperclip and a small screwdriver. Finally, I felt the lock give way and I carefully lifted the diary open. The pages were filled with her writing. Her hand was almost scrawled, hard to read. The words were so small I knew they must have been written while she was supposed to be asleep. There was something so personal about it, something that made me hesitant. But I needed something to hold on to. The scent of the diary, musty and a little faded, was something that reminded me of Becca. I began to read. Her entries, in those small, cramped letters, told me stories of a young girl trying to understand the world. I read about her best friend, her first crush, her fights with her sister, her hopes and dreams, her secrets, and there it was, hidden within a line about her sister, a sentence that stopped my breath, almost invisible, a secret hidden amongst Becca's other thoughts. It talked about Derek and Sam, and about her sense that something was off. She'd even written how she'd felt uncomfortable, at times, with how much time the three of them had been spending together, that she'd wondered if Derek was really paying attention to her anymore. It was just a sentence, but it felt like a bombshell dropped on my heart. The realization that Becca had felt something was off before I did was almost more hurtful than the actual betrayal itself. As I read further, I found myself feeling like I had somehow cheated. This wasn't my story to read. I shouldn't have gone into Becca's personal space like this, but I had found it, and in a way, it felt like Becca was there with me. Becca didn't know what Derek and Sam had done, but she felt it, felt that something was off in our family, that something was not right between the adults. It made me feel that maybe I hadn't been as tuned in to Becca as I thought I had, that I hadn't done everything in my power to be there for her. It made me feel sad and guilty. I continued to read Becca's diary, searching for clues, wanting to hear Becca's voice, but I eventually came to realize that the most important part of her story wasn't about Derek or Sam, but about Becca, the strong, compassionate, and intelligent girl that she was, and the amazing person she was becoming. Reading Becca's words was a balm for my soul, a reminder that while our world had changed, she still lived on in our hearts. I spent weeks coming to terms with the betrayal, trying to piece together a new life, to figure out how to start over. I started seeing a therapist, someone who was just there to listen to me, who didn't have any judgment or preconceived notions. I needed to process this, to get through the days and find some sense of normalcy. One of the most challenging things for me was telling my mother. I had been very close to my mom, especially after losing Becca, but I was nervous about what she would say. I knew that she would understand the pain of losing a child, but she also liked Sam. I wasn't sure if she would understand my decision to not only leave Derek, but to cut off ties with Sam. But when I told her about the affair, about how Derek had betrayed us both, my mother had listened. She hadn't been happy, but she wasn't shocked either. "Honey, this is your life," she said. "You're going to have to decide what is best for you. I'll always be there for you." That gave me some peace. I knew my mom, even though she was heartbroken, would always be on my side. Derek was devastated. He'd said he'd accepted our divorce, but now he was asking for another chance, pleading for me to come back. I found it hard to be around him, to look into his eyes. I was constantly reminded of the pain, the loss, and the betrayal. He said he was really sorry, that he'd made a huge mistake. He promised that if I took him back, he'd do anything to prove that he was changed. I had to be honest with myself. No amount of apologizing, no promises of changing, would ever truly undo what he had done. He was the same person who had chosen to hurt me, the same person who had cheated on me, who had let me down when I needed him most. And in the end, it wasn't about what Derek could offer me or what promises he could make. It was about what I deserved, and that was respect, honesty, and loyalty. He didn't understand. He tried to come over again to beg, but I wasn't home. I had to tell myself that this was just a phase, a step in the healing process, that I couldn't allow him back into my life right now. He told me he'd always love me, but I didn't need love. I needed someone who would understand that I had been betrayed and who would respect my decision to move on. Months later, after dealing with the divorce, selling the house, and starting over in a new apartment, I finally felt myself beginning to heal. The first day I moved into my new place, I took a deep breath. I stood in my new kitchen, looking around. It was empty and bare. I could hear the echo of my own breath in the quiet. I closed my eyes. I let the silence wash over me. My world had changed, but now I was ready to start again. It would be a new beginning. I still missed Becca. I still mourned her, but there was now a space in my heart for healing, a space for forgiveness. And I was finally ready to start living my life again. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun set over the city. It was the end of another day, and the beginning of something new. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, like the coolness of the evening breeze. The world felt vast and expansive, and I was ready to fill it with new experiences, new friendships, new dreams. I was going to take a chance on life again, one step at a time. The world was full of possibility. It was time for me to find mine. And I would. I am not Oop. Please don't message or comment on any of the linked posts.